I give a fuck? Why do I give a fuck? Why do I try so hard? Why do I care so much?
Welcome to Why Do I Give a Fuck? A cross-cultural conversation between myself, Deanne Tate,
and Johanna Thompson. In these times of great struggle and possible shift, we ask ourselves,
why do we give a fuck about any of it? How does the lens we see the world through impact what we see?
And what do we do about it? Welcome to our next episode.
We were planning on talking about something different today, but we are in the wake of a most recent, in the past few days, attempted assassination on the Republican candidate for president. You and I were like, we don't need to be talking about anything else but this right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's the conversation of the day.
Yeah.
That someone tried to shoot D. Trump and take him out.
Grazed his ear at a campaign rally in Pennsylvania. So the airwaves have been full of
what's been the news? What's been the talk of? What's been the conversation? Because I'm not hearing any of it because I'm not in U.S. territory. So
you got out.
Got out.
Yeah,
I knew it was coming.
Yeah,
I knew it was coming. I just didn't know what, and I didn't imagine that it would be like this. And I do think this is the catalyst for so much more.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So what's the news of the day?
So when it happened on Saturday,
where was it?
A campaign rally in Butler, Pennsylvania.
Right.
And
brotherly love.
Yeah, it was an outdoor. I'll just set the stage for those who may not be familiar. So it was an outdoor event with a stage set up, podium, speakers, bleachers. So folks kind of close into the stage and of course behind him, because he always likes to have all of the key demographics behind him. It looked like it was set up in the middle of like a farmland kind of thing. It was a wide open space with some buildings around, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but there was quite a bit of space in front of the podium, in front of the stage, that was just standing room. That was general admission. People were going to be standing, and I've seen quite a few of these diagrams because they've been talking about where the shooter was and where the Secret Service was, and there was big fail. I mean, there was a building not 150 yards, which is a very easy shot, according to the experts, when you're working with this kind of rifle. And there was nobody on the roof. There was nobody paying attention to those buildings. It just baffles the mind.
But there were snipers, though, right? Because I heard
there were snipers in other parts around, but there was nobody on that building. There was no
where the
gunman ended up being. Yeah, there was nobody. Okay. They've been, slowly but surely kind of eking out videos that bystanders were taking during the course of the lead up to the shooting. And there were quite a few, I think it was like 1 minute and 26 seconds where people in the crowd, like farther away from close to the building where the shooter was perched on the roof, that spotted him 1 minute or 26 seconds before he started shooting. And they were standing there, and you can hear on the video, you can hear them saying, there's a guy up on the roof. There's a guy up on the roof. He's got a gun. And they're hollering at the police that are, as you would expect, kind of all over the place.
I can't believe that people didn't.
Nobody did anything.
Oh, very interesting.
Nobody did anything. There was a cop, and I know I'm making a broad statement, but in that 1 minute and 26 seconds, there didn't seem to be a lot of movement to try to take care of this threat. And then there was a police officer, actually was just watching.
I'm wondering if it's because it was a white person.
Well, that certainly could have weighed in. I mean, I don't even know why a rooftop like that was such a choice perch, had nobody on it, had nobody around it, it had not occurred to anybody that this rooftop needed to be covered. And it's not like it was a cityscape where there were lots and lots of rooftops and they just forgot that one. This is out in the middle of a farm country kind of space. And so there were only maybe, I don't remember, maybe 4 buildings is coming to mind, maybe 5. And they were more like farming buildings, long expanse buildings with these long rooftops. And it wasn't like there were a lot of them. It wouldn't have taken that much to cover them. And so the fact that there was nobody up on that roof line is incredibly suspect. And then you've got people on the ground, bystanders, citizens going, there's somebody up on the roof with a gun, and you're not seeing any movement. You're not seeing a rush. And people have been comparing, I don't know if you've seen any of the video, but people have been comparing. I don't remember exactly what the event was, but it was, I think, at the last lead up to the last election. So that would have been 2020, where somebody in the crowd yelled gun. So no shots fired. No, I don't even know if they actually recovered a weapon, but somebody in the crowd yelled gun, and the Secret Service descended on him like, and rushed him off the stage so fast. It was like that, like you would see in the movies. And so I have seen folks comparing what they did at the perceived possibility of a gun versus what they did at an actual shots fired experience, blood on the president. Clearly he's been hit. And it just doesn't ring true. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't, so they kind of surround him, and they cocoon him. You can't see him at all. He's down like right in front of the podium, and you hear talking, and I'm sitting there going, why aren't they moving him? And then you hear somebody say the shooter is down. We're all clear. So they'd already shot, the young man who had shot the rifle, and you hear, all clear, all clear. And they're still huddled. They've still got him surrounded on the stage behind the podium. You can't see him. And then all of a sudden he stands up, and you hear him say, wait, I need my shoes. I need my shoes. So somehow he lost his shoes. I don't know how that happened. If he'd already taken them off and he wanted to put them back on before he left the stage. I don't know. And so he comes up out of this, burial of Secret Service agents, and he's got blood on his face because, the bullet grazed his ear. And that's a striking.
Did we see the blood on his face before he got cocooned?
No, actually, he was kind of looking to his right when you start to hear the shots go, and you see him reach for his ear. So he feels it. And then he goes down. So no, he reemerges. I didn't see any footage of him having blood on him. So yeah,
so reemerges with a face full of blood.
He emerges with an ear full of blood and then splatter of blood on his face. Right.
Suspect.
Yes.
That seems really fantastically
theatrical. And also too, as I'm saying this, I'm thinking about visually what he looked like when he reemerged, and the blood that's on his face is like in a straight line, which doesn't happen in nature, No,
it does not happen, especially if a bullet is hitting this way, it's going to
and going that way. And if the blood got on his face because of his hand movement, it would have been smudged. It would have been, but it was like straight lines. If you look at the imagery, the still shots taken of him as he's being escorted off the stage, you can see pretty clearly. This is the part that to me makes me feel like it was staged, and maybe they didn't, the deal was don't actually hit him. I don't know, but this is the part that makes me feel like it was staged. He had the presence of mind as he comes up into this Secret Service surrounding, and you can see him and you can see the blood, and he starts lifting his fist in the air, and he stops. They let him
white man with fist in the air.
With the fist in the air going,
bloody white man with fist in the air.
And he's saying, fight. You can see him saying it. He says it multiple times as he's standing still and he's surrounded by Secret Service. I know.
I cannot.
It was like a movie.
I cannot. It was a movie.
Yeah.
It was 110%.
I truly believe it was, because somebody can ask him a question that he's not prepared for, and he doesn't have the presence of mind to think on his feet, much less in the wake of
after trauma,
after
a major
trauma,
and
for him to stand up and
Secret
go.
Service is not going to allow him to murder. They're going to move him
They
off the
didn't
stage
move
and shut
him.
everything
They had
down.
him down in that
So
cocoon at
that's
least. I didn't count it, but I'm saying 15,
enough to put blood
20
on the face.
seconds. Right. And then, and then he stops and he wants to do the fist thing and the flag is behind him. So it's the perfect photo op. And they're not moving him. They're letting him control how
And
fast
letting
he gets
him be
taken off the
present.
stage, which
Hmm.
doesn't feel concordant with the very limited knowledge I know of how the Secret Service moves through space.
But
So
this was also after the all clear that the person had been taken down.
it was, you could hear on the video that I watched, you could hear through the radios, all clear, shoot her down.
Okay.
And so they did know the Secret
Hmm.
Service that surrounded him on the stage had been radioed to be told that it was
Okay.
clear.
Okay.
Um,
So that offers a little bit more reprieve from the level of theatrics because, but I would love to hear from someone from Secret Service to
right.
communicate what
Oh,
protocol looks like
yeah.
whenever there's a shooter that has been identified, period, whether or not gun goes off or not,
I mean,
how it
it's
is that they
entirely
would.
possible that I'm sorry, interrupt you, but it's entirely possible that the outer, like the environment that they were in dictated how they behaved. Like, because I'm thinking about the video that it's being compared to was in an environment where they were indoors. It was the backstage area was secure. And they knew if they shuffled him off stage that he would be in a secure area. This was out wide open. Maybe they weren't entirely sure at the moment, at least the agents that were around him on the stage knew where the shots were coming from. It was so maybe that's the like shelter in place kind of thing you do until you hear the all clear, because shuffling him off the stage to this area, if the shooter's over there, you're moving him closer to I don't know. It looked very staged to me. And Amanda Seals, who I follow on Instagram, comedian, actress, content creator, she was saying that
Political advocate,
political
authoritarian,
advocate, yeah, humanitarian, many,
a
many things.
humanitarian,
The
yeah.
list of things that she does is too long to mention. Love you, Amanda. But she was saying, it's not unusual. This man has already shown us that he's willing to put others in harm's way to elevate his status in the world. And January 6th is a perfect example of that. I mean, people died on January 6th, and he orchestrated that day and did not care that it had the potential to lead into the deaths of others. And because I guess, people have been saying, well, he wouldn't have wanted somebody else to die. I'm like, I don't give
Right.
that man any kind of ability to care about whether or not someone else dies. So someone else did die. I want to honor that
Yeah, let's honor
there
that
was
the
a
reality.
human.
Yeah.
I'm not his
I think
name
it
is
was two people. Wasn't it two people that
two people were
were shot?
I heard that two people were shot, but I believe there was only one person that died, but I believe the other person was critical but in stable condition.
And how did that happen? Like how, like the bullet, you know what I mean? Like how did they get killed if the bullet grazed his
They
ear?
were not behind him. When I watched the last time I saw the diagram, like the aerial view of the whole venue where they were showing where the shooter was and the distance and the trajectory and all of that. If you're standing on the stage behind the podium, the person that was killed was to Trump's right, off, not behind him, as you kind of would expect it to be, because there were always so many people behind him, but they were off. The spectator that died was off to the right in one of the side bleacher areas. And he was a firefighter. He was a father. He was there with his family, and he
Hmm.
apparently shielded his family with his body to protect them when the
Hmm.
shots started happening, and he was killed.
So
So
there was more than one shot then.
there were at least six.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow. So it
And I
was like
did,
a spring.
yeah. And they
Hmm.
sounded, I mean, when you watch the video, they sound like a BB gun. They don't sound like a
Sounds
right.
like pop, pop, pop.
Yeah. It's not it's almost sounds like popcorn. It doesn't sound like a caliber of gun that would come out of a rifle, but I'm not an expert either. And the kid was apparently not a great shot. There's been lots of talk about him and his history and his radicalization. He was only 20 years old. So, I mean, obviously he was an
Baby.
adult, still a kid. I'm not even sure I knew that it was possible for a large bullet like that to just graze an ear, and like essentially just scratch it, But I guess it is possible. So when it happened on Saturday, of course, phones started buzzing. I started getting texts from people, Trump's been shot, Trump's been shot. And my first thought was he staged it. That was my first thought.
Very first immediate thought.
Yeah. Because
Do you
it's
want
just,
to know what my first thought is, just as you say
yeah.
that, to
Yes, I've been
juxtapose?
talking too much, so I'd love to hear from you.
Well, no, I mean, but I just think that it's really interesting in this moment because my first thought was, I hope it's not a non-white person.
Yes. I was listening to Linda Sarsour
1000%.
live last night, and she said that's the first thing she thought. I
The
hope it's not a
first
Muslim
thing,
person.
the
Yeah.
very first thing, I was like, come on. I know we don't typically do this type of thing anyway,
Right.
but please,
Please. Yeah.
please, God, please don't let it be a non-white person
And
of
I have to
any
be honest, when
type.
I heard that he was dead, when I heard that they had shot the shooter, I thought, well, he's not white.
Ah, interesting.
Because that often
Yeah,
is the case. You hear shooter in custody, and I'm like, oh, he's white,
he's
whereas
right.
if he's not white,
Hmm.
down in a heartbeat. So yeah,
But
I
going for somebody who is in a, running for president might, you know,
yeah,
I'm curious if, you know what I mean, that is a different level of, which is unfortunate because we're all human and we all should be, um, you know, valued equally. But
at
I
least
imagine
taken
that.
out by a
And then
secret.
also like the narrative for this being staged, you need the person to not be around to be able to
Right.
talk or report or talk, give
Yeah.
any type of accounting of the
To
purposefulness or the reasons behind
right.
this act of violence.
Yeah.
So to
Yeah.
go back and honor the people that did get harmed and hurt and all the trauma that surrounded that. But then this reality that this level of violence perpetrated on Donald Trump does mean and does like speak into kind of the undergird of violence that we exist in the US in the US. And I'm not in the US, so I am getting an accounting from you actually. So I appreciate you going so thoroughly around what's happening. I got a text message that was like, to all of my homies that are not on US territory, I just want you to be informed
Okay.
that that Donald Trump, there was an assassination attempt on Donald Trump. And then communicating that with the community of folks that I was in, the responsiveness was it was bound to happen.
I thought about texting you. Because I know that you're not on US soil any longer intentionally. And I know that you don't consume news like that. When we communicated through text yesterday about whether or not we would record another show today and would we talk about the assassination attempt, I was curious to hear you go, there was an assassination attempt because I wasn't sure if you knew. I didn't intentionally text you because I thought, would it just be trauma inducing? I was like,
Mm.
you intentionally left this soil for a reason. And so I had a mindfulness moment around that. And that's why I didn't text you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that consideration. And yeah, one of the reasons why I decided not to be on US soil or US territory is because I know that the violence is going to ensue. So it's just like it's like an intuitive knowing, but then also if we're looking at like what our social political climate is, what the rhetoric is, the choices that we are being presented with, I don't see much of a difference. And looking at like with the level of global violence that the US is participating and supporting, all of this. And it also brings up, well, I know I'm going to talk about white on white violence, and I already
Yeah.
said that like that's definitely one of the tropes that is going to be communicated in this
I haven't heard a
conversation. So
peep out
thank
of
God
anybody that this is white on
at
white
all,
violence.
right? But this is white on white violence, which we know
Yes,
is
it
highly
is.
prevalent in the US.
Yes.
But yeah, this white on white violence and white on white violence from somebody who supposedly shares the same
Right.
political ideology as you, right?
Which I
So we
think
have a
is very
young
interesting.
Republican person of
Hmm.
voting age
Hmm.
who is having this responsiveness. I also started to think about what is the narrative story that they're going to tell. Also thinking about the level of increased security and policing that's going to come forth after this. And what that means when there's an increase in policing, the criminalization happens with Black and brown bodies, even though this is white violence that's occurred. And then I was also thinking of what this means for people who are standing in support of Palestine
Mhm.
rising up at large event venues in protest. And
Right.
now, with more increased surveillance, what the level of targeting of any of those type of people, and but what is it going to look like for any type of awareness or agitation about what's happening in Gaza, and those people being targeted because there's an increase in presence of law enforcement because this event has happened. Also, providing more security for Donald Trump, who is known to instigate and support violence, and particularly white violence, or like allowing white violence, not really calling it in, but then being able to be the person who's going to be more protected is a kind of horrible juxtaposition, an oxymoron to what our to further how messed up our social political climate is right now. I believe that this is just the beginning catalyst for it to get worse and worse and worse.
There's been a lot of talk about political violence and how abhorrent it is. And current President Biden gave several addresses between Saturday and Monday talking about, the condemnation of political violence while sending 500-pound bombs to Israel so that they can kill Palestinians. So the
Mhm.
disconnect between what is actually political violence, we're going to be upset about one man getting his ear nicked, but we're not going to be upset about schools being shot up. Is that not political violence? We're not going to be upset about Gazans being decimated with our money and our bombs. We're not going to be upset about cop cities and the amount of Black and brown folks who die every day. I heard a stat that the police kill on average 1,000 people a year. They've already killed
Mhm.
like 700 people this year, and those are just the ones we know about that are
Hear about.
reported as police involved shooting that's not explained away by something else. So it has raised to the surface, to kind of tie it into the theme of this conversation, why do we give AF about any of this, is because of the, just as you said, the escalation of policing that's going to
Mhm.
happen as a result of this event happening that many might say he encourages. I don't advocate violence at all, and I'm not advocating that he should be shot. Now
Absolutely.
he's the victim, which he always tries to play. I mean,
Play the
his
victim.
and he,
So white maleness.
I
Yeah.
think we've said on these conversations before, Trump is not the catalyst, he's a symptom. He
Hmm.
is the personification of white supremacy. He is a white
Hmm.
male with a deep level of entitlement all his life who believes he's above all kind of rules and law,
Everything.
accountability, and all of the things. And he's supported in that mindset every way he turns, even though he has been convicted in a couple of different courts and he still has 30 some cases and indictments that are against him that are pending. It doesn't matter. Following the assassination attempt, the judge in Florida who was hearing the case against him with regard to the top secret documents that he took from the White House when he left office, she dropped the case on Sunday. And then Monday started the Republican National Convention. And of
So
course,
perfectly timed.
he shows up last night with the bandage on his ear. And the fact that they still went ahead with the convention less than 48 hours after an
Yeah.
assassination attempt is another reason why I'm thinking that this was staged, because, or at least
Maybe this is the way to get
it was
him not to
orchestrated.
be, not to continue running. Like, maybe we are, I don't, I'm, I have, I'm not even going to speculate
Yeah.
in that way.
Yeah.
I am, yeah, but I am really curious to see how this gets spun and how this gets used. And more importantly, I'm curious to see how the US population
Mhm.
responds.
What's frustrating is to hear President Biden and other folks talking about how this isn't who we are. And I'm like, have you met
It's
us?
absolutely.
This is
But
exactly
and
who we
that's what I'm
are.
saying. This white male victimhood and this
Yeah,
like denial of like what's reality and
right.
inability to be actually connected to
Yeah,
like the current events that are happening and the way people are having conversations about how violent we are as a nation. That's what's happening with this. And then when you say that they're different sides of the same coin, this is really showing that because a couple weeks ago, y'all were fighting about who has the better golf hand and like going at each other down
yeah,
each other's throat.
I
And
know.
now it's this we need to show up better. If we're talking about violence right now, we are talking about, white folks are committing the most heinous violent, the people in power right now making these decisions are creating the most harmful and violent situations. But this is historical. It's just that we haven't looked at it, you know, from a historical place to be able to
Right.
make the linkages of how violent things are in this country, how our mindset is violence, the cycle of violence that continues to proliferate more violence. And that's what we're seeing. And I think that that really is going to increase. And I am concerned about what that looks like for people who remain on
Yeah.
US territory. And so we really do need to like shift our focus and shift our North Star to figuring out what it looks like to kind of reconcile this violence and think about ways to shine a light on peace building or reconciliation in some way. Like what are the efforts and actions? Because like South Africa was able to do it, Rwanda was able to do it, Germany was able to do it. And like what are the things and what are the resources that we are gonna not just lip service about this is not who we are, this is who we are. And we have to like you have to name the thing first and
Yeah.
then really develop some solid strategies and put some infrastructure and some resource behind shifting the narrative so that we become the thing that we are saying that we are, which is
Right.
I don't even know. This is not who we are. I don't even know what the definition of who we are is. And I think it's critical for us to like really be honest with ourselves about that.
Yeah, the denial of the history of this country. And we see that happening even more so in the legislation that is dictating what can and can't be taught in schools and what can and cannot be, even though what can and cannot be taught in schools has been manipulated for centuries. That's not necessarily new, but the legislation that we've been seeing in select states it feels like it's escalated, to a new level of block.
Absolutely.
Before it was kind of just inferred that we didn't talk about these things, and now it's like, no, you absolutely can't talk about X, Y, and Z.
As we're continuing to do the thing that they don't want us to talk about, which is
Right.
the level of violence and racism and all of the isms that have existed to keep white supremacy alive.
Yeah.
Power and position
Yeah.
is the drug. White people have an addictive spirit to violence.
Thanks for joining us. Until next time, as you move throughout your day, continue to ask yourself,
Why do I give a
Fuck is produced in collaboration with Johanna and Deanne. Music by Norwegian musician Water. See you next time.